It is with great pleasure that I get to introduce our moderator for the TV Transform panel, Howard Shimmel. Howard is the Chief Research Officer of Turner. In his role, he leads the day-to-day management of Turner's television and digital research professionals supporting the domestic Turner networks and businesses. Prior to joining Turner in 2012, Howard was the EVP at Nielsen, also has a ton of experience at AOL, WBIS, and MTV Networks. Howard is an ARF Board of Directors member, and I can personally say that he is super supportive and an advocate of the young pros. So without further ado, Howard Shimmel.
Good morning. Okay, so first of all, you guys all should be congratulated for taking time out of your careers and your work days to be here. You know, this is just an amazing initiative by the ARF. I would just continue to lean into this as hard as you can because
I won't put it back there.
Between what you learn and your networking, this is an invaluable part of building your career. So congratulations to you guys for taking time today. So hopefully this will be fun. We'll make this interactive as we're going through this. Think a lot about questions. Just to sort of set this up, if you guys like and thrive on chaos, there's probably never been a more cool time to be in this industry. You know, unfortunately, I'm not a young pro. I've been at this for quite so many years. But there's never honestly been a time where the role that you play and the challenges that we're facing have been greater, but also the tools that you have available to solve problems have been more precise and more actionable. If you think about all of the major components of our business, media companies like Viacom or Turner, advertisers, agencies, we are all undergoing pretty major changes to our business models. And with those changes, what's necessary is really smart thinking, great data, new approaches to business. And it's something that, as researchers, I think we're privileged to be able to sort of have a major seat at the table and help drive that. So what we have is a really esteemed panel where we're going to dig into issues around data, currency, measurement, and maybe a little bit about the role of research in organizations. So without further ado, let me introduce the panel, and I'll read just briefly from their bios. So on the far right is Srishti Gupta from IRI. Srishti is the president of IRI's Media Center of Excellence, and she's a member of IRI's executive leadership team. Prior to being at IRI, she served as managing partner and executive VP at Mediacom, so agency and vendor experience. Next is Justin Fromm. Justin is director of ad sales research at Hulu. He advocates for the viewer in the era of purposeful viewing. So maybe Justin can tell us a little bit about purposeful viewing. Prior to Hulu, Justin spent 8 years at ABC Network. Last but not least is Bryson Gordon. Bryson is SVP of Data Strategy at Viacom Media Networks. He's responsible for the development of innovative data products and Viacom's Vantage product, which Turner actually competes with in the marketplace. So if we get going against each other, it's only natural. Prior to coming to the media side, he worked at Microsoft, leading marketing, consumer marketing, product management, and business incubation teams across Windows, Xbox, Office, Microsoft Store, and Surface. So with that, let's get into the panel. So the first thing I thought it would make sense to do is sort of start with looking at today's world from the perspective of advertisers, right? Advertisers are charged with having to find a way to deal with all of the confusion in the media marketplace, all of the noise that they're hearing from all of our companies, and people who like the hosts of this event, Google. And they're obviously charged with trying to make sense of it and then build successful marketing strategies that drive sales or drives brands. So Srishti, give us from your perspective, you're probably closest day-to-day dealing with advertisers. What are you hearing from them, and what are the challenges that you see them facing?
So, you know, when you started, Howard, you talked about chaos, right? And I think that really sums it up. There are two fundamentally big challenges here. The first is that as advertisers grapple with digital channels in general, and with TV becoming more digital as well, they're really struggling with how to think about even allocation of funds, right? The whole paradigm of, you know, running a mixed model once a year and then letting it play out just is not working anymore. So I think that is one. The other is the measure of success has to move from being around media exposure and metrics to being more about business impact. And there's a lot of pressure from the advertisers and their research teams to prove that out.
Now, and you guys maybe talk for the room a little bit about, from the impact standpoint, you guys are doing some really innovative work. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I think one of the, you know, as I mentioned, right, they're not interested anymore, or advertisers want to move away as much as possible from talking about GRPs or impressions and more about, did I actually drive sales? And not just over the long term, but very tactically over the short term. So one of the key philosophies that we have within IRI is to tie each and every media impression, each and every media exposure, whether it's digital or television, back to in-store sales. And then the ability to actually optimize on that on a fairly regular basis, right? We're not talking about months, but we're talking about weeks. And that happened in digital, but not so much on the television side. But I think there's increasingly a lot of pressure to prove that out for TV as well.
Cool. So Justin, give us your perspective. When Hulu is trying to get an advertiser's attention, what are the stories you're telling about sort of Hulu's role in the media mix?
So I think that what we do talk about is this idea of purposeful viewing. When we talk about what's happening in television now, is that we see just a disaggregation of the linear schedule, right? Where we used to go home and sit down at 8 o'clock on Wednesday to watch our show. Not that long ago. It's just not the case anymore. And I'm preaching to the choir in this room. I doubt anyone goes home and plans on Thursday night at 8 to go sit down and watch whatever's on Thursday night at 8, because you can watch it anywhere you want at any time, and you don't even need to think about where to find it. You kind of know where it is, or you can do a search and you can do that. So what happens is that every viewing kind of session then, right? So when viewers now sit down in front of television, there's not a kind of let's see what's on mentality, right? Whereas you used to sit down and kind of flip through and kind of see what was going on. Most people now sit down and have something in mind that they want to watch. Even if they do kind of flip on to see what's on, they know they can go somewhere and then find something to view. So I think when we talk about where TV is and where TV is going from a viewing standpoint, that's key for us, and that's something that, you know, while I think is intuitive to us as kind of media professionals, is still something that everyone's trying to grapple with and get comfortable with.
That's great, thanks. And Bryce, from your perspective, when you guys go out and talk to advertisers, what are you hearing about what they're looking for from media vendors?
I mean, I think the perspective that I'll bring to this is one of a person who has been working in media for 7 months.
That's cool.
And who has never been a researcher. So being on a media panel at a young professional researchers organization is a little bit surreal. The way I think about it, though, is I actually think about media second and marketing first. And that is a really important distinction. And what I mean by that is if you just think about what has happened in the last, let's say 15 years, from a marketing standpoint, what is fascinating is the way that within the last 15 years, marketing science, and what I mean by that is the ability to really pinpoint not just sort of, hey, what's a message we should throw out there about my new toothpaste or about my new car or my new device, but really understanding for whom is this product and this message going to succeed better than something else. and doing that at a level of precision, doing that with a level of thoughtfulness, and then applying that to how you approach media in a cross-platform way. That has been the fundamental evolution. And frankly, you know, Howard and I, as now like old TV people, I guess, you know, that's sort of how
6 months.
6 months. I'm an old TV person now. But the way that we think about this is that the marketing science and digital capabilities for targeting, for measurement, for a lot of things like that have grown up together over the last 15 years, and TV has been a little bit on the sidelines. What is interesting is that as CMOs have become much more technical over this last decade or so, the desire to bring that to the premium context and the scale of television has become really top priority. And hence, you're starting to see things grow up in the market, like what Turner's doing, what Viacom has been doing with Vantage. And so that has fundamentally changed the conversation with an advertiser about how media can actually now, frankly, adapt to the sophistication of their marketing strategy, whereas 3-4 years ago it absolutely could not.
Yeah, that's great. So the next thing I want to talk about is a little bit about data. You know, if you rewind this industry 20 years ago, you know, guys who were in the TV world, Justin, when he was at ABC, we cared about one data vendor primarily, right? Nielsen. And hopefully I won't offend anybody from Nielsen in the room. But, you know, now we have infinite different data sources that could be used. And I think to sort of the point Bryson made, we no longer only care about exposure, opportunity to see, demographics. So maybe, Bryson, talk a little bit more about Vantage and maybe talk about it from the perspective of your CEO, Philippe Dumond, has been very public about the amount of deals, revenue that you're going to do that have nothing to do with Nielsen demographic ratings. So maybe talk a little bit about the data and what's driving that strategy.
Well, I mean, what's driving that strategy is sort of, like I mentioned before, it's the evolution of marketing. It's the advertisers' desire to actually transact in different ways because they have been transacting in different ways through the digital that they've been first playing with, now learning from, now really using as sort of a core tool within kind of the toolbox. So when we think about measurement, or when we think about transaction or currency as it pertains to Vantage, it's less about turning our back on Nielsen. It's much more about turning towards what the advertiser is asking for. And if an advertiser is saying, I just spent $2.5 million on a very sophisticated segmentation study that is giving me a precise taxonomy that I want to use when I'm thinking about my allocation of media, if then that turns into, okay, I'm going to sell you adults 18 to 49, that dilution creates disappointment, and frankly, you're going to lose an opportunity to actually sell inventory. Right. So Vantage is ultimately about, instead of forcing a dilution to take place, we're saying you've developed out a sophisticated taxonomy, maybe using psychographic techniques, maybe using modeling within a data management platform or a CRM database or whatever it may be. Our job is to say, great, you've done that. We're going to take what you have done, we're going to target, optimize, measure against what that is, and we're going to transact that way. And to a lot of advertisers who are sort of more along that spectrum of advanced audience insights and understanding and definition, they love it. I think that's why Philippe likes talking about it.
Yeah, cool. So here's a little bit of trivia that you could mention tonight at the bar when you're drinking with your friends. Who was president of the United States when this industry, the media industry, started using age-sex demographics to transact? Any brave volunteers?
I know.
Lyndon Johnson. So think about it. The thought of women 18 to 49 was something this industry adopted in 1964. And we're just now sort of pulling out of that. So you use that tonight at the bar. Maybe the bartender will buy a free drink for that important piece of trivia. So Justin, you guys live in this world of Hulu migrating from phone and PCs to the big screen, to over the top. Maybe talk a little bit about what data challenges that has created and maybe what opportunities it's created.
Right. So I think that, and I want to speak to a little bit of what Bryson said. You know, I think over the period of the last 15 years, we've seen a couple of things happen in that the audience is fragmented. So you can no longer just go to the big networks to aggregate 50% of your audience to reach them in a given night. And this comfort with real-time feedback and this one-to-one marketing, the kind of the behavioral click-through has kind of evolved and grown up so that everyone's really comfortable with that, so that measurement kind of has been able to catch up to it in ways that it wasn't able to even 10 years ago. But the problem with measurement is that the technology for viewing, so the technology we have in our phones, and our tablets, even our PCs, and now our televisions, is advancing way faster than anyone can keep up. So while just a couple of years ago, in fact, just last year, the third quarter of 2014 was when we saw the real shift at Hulu, and we saw critical mass. 50% of our streams started to come on connected TVs or over the top. And this was an issue we saw coming. And we've worked with a couple of the vendors. We worked with both Comscore and Nielsen to try to first just account for all those viewers. Because if you kind of can't even account for them, if you can't kind of tell advertisers how many people are viewing, you can't even sell that, let alone demonstrating kind of who's viewed and getting that one-to-one relationship that we've been talking about to demonstrate business outcomes. I think that one of the key issues is that there is so much data now that is created. The biggest issue is understanding data quality. And I think that is the challenge for everyone in this room. I think that we need to always kind of remember the roots of measurement, right? Universes and samples. And at least if we're kind of willing to work with best available data, I think we have to make sure that we are informing the C-suite kind of what we're representing with the data that we have available. Because again, we've become much more comfortable with working. I mean, we were, even 5 years ago, we were talking about fusion of data sources, and people were very pushed back on that. And here we are kind of using feedback from one set-top maker, potentially, to demonstrate audiences. We've had to evolve, and I think we'll continue to do that, though.
Yeah, one of the things, thanks for that. One of the things that I always tell Jasmine and other folks in my group is that we're never going to lose the role of being sort of being the guides of what is methodologically good enough to use. One of the things everybody should do when you leave here tonight is there's a website called aboutthedata.com. And that website has, you put in your address, and it basically has what Acxiom thinks you are, and it's that information that guides ads you get online and direct mail that you get in your, direct mail you get in postal mail. We did a test with Research at Turner 2 summers ago where, we had everybody do that and do their profile. They think I'm a hunter. I'm a Jewish kid from Queens. I'm not a hunter. But the key thing there is just someone's using that data to market to me. Mm-hmm. And if there's not the right people, you guys playing the role to say, let's think about the data, let's think about how projectable it is, and maybe say to your organization, hey, we can't use this because it's not usable. That's always going to be there, and that role is actually going to get more important as there's more data. So Srishti, talk a little bit about, you have what Justin just described of moving TV to over the top or digital over the top, how does IRI think about it from the standpoint of trying to provide holistic measurement around campaigns?
Right. So, as Justin said, right, there's been a huge, the form factor over which content is being consumed is changing very, very quickly, right? And so traditionally, advertisers would be quite comfortable with getting one set of metrics for television and then getting, a different set of metrics for digital. And that is just not acceptable anymore. So at IRI, when we look at it, we basically start with the consumer. At the end of the day, it's not just about media. It's about all marketing to that consumer. And it's not just about marketing that's happening through these mass channels. It's also what happens when I go in the store. So our point of view is that if we can tie all of those media exposures, all of those in-store activities, which is when I go into a store, I see an end cap or a display, right? Or there's a promotion. Or if the weather is really hot, then I'm selling more ice creams, right? So it's about, for that particular consumer and where they are, completing that 360 view. And having, to Howard's point, all of that data reside in one place and have it be easily accessible is really where it comes from, right? So speed to insights is important, so that data needs to be accessible really quickly. And it's no trivial task, actually. Just to, if you think about it, to tie all of those exposures and the in-store impact to each and every individual, it's no trivial task. So taking that, tying it all, speed to insights. But then the other piece of this is scale. I think where a lot of advertisers are struggling is many of these data sources don't scale, right? So, and the targeting has started to become so narrow that it's absurd almost, right? So if you're looking for like, a left-handed mother who only buys, I don't know, high-fiber cereal on Tuesdays. Yeah, maybe there are 3 of those, right? But what do you do with that? So at the end of the day, the targeting needs to be meaningful. It needs to be scalable for most of these brands.
Cool. Okay, thanks. A couple more questions, and then we'll open it up to the floor. So, Bryson, talk a little bit about addressable advertising. Is that a good guy for companies like ours? Is it a bad guy? Is it scary?
I mean, I think it's great. I think you have to start with, I'll speak for both of us. Like, what's the business we're in? And it's funny, as a tech guy, I continuously need to remind myself that we're actually in the entertainment business. And that's a really different perspective versus thinking about we're building tech products. Yes, we are building tech products. Yes, we're doing that. But fundamentally, it was Redstone. Content is king, right? I mean, we are in the entertainment business. And so ultimately, we are producing great content that people love and they become raving fans of. And so when you start from that position, you start to look at how and where is it consumed, and what is my ability to go and monetize that. Mm-hmm. And for the last 50 years, it's been consumed through traditional linear television, and we have monetized that through the sale of GRPs. Right. That's obviously changed and continues to change. And so when we think about addressable is just, it is another way for us to think about the consumption of the content that we create and to think about new methods, new business models, et cetera, to go and drive the monetization of that content. The fact that it allows us to get closer to one-to-one marketing for an advertiser's individual segment, that's great. Yeah. But the really good advertisers have way more than one segment. A lot of the very sophisticated advertisers have hundreds. And so it's not sort of the anxiety around, oh my gosh, I'm no longer going to buy, millions and millions of impressions, I'm going to buy 14 of them. Right. That's not really the case. It's just that you're going to be able to better deliver more targeted messages with the right messaging to a different subset of what an advertiser's segment will be.
Yeah, good. Now, just in your world, you are addressable today.
Right.
What % of your ad deals are people actually using real data and targeting to be addressable versus you're selling more broadly?
I think that we continue to sell fairly broadly. I think that when we sell ourselves, we are a complement to television, and most of our advertisers are using their television creative. One of the challenges that addressable creates is the cost for creative, right? So when you talk about trying to find the 3 left-handed mothers who buy cereal on Tuesdays, or even reaching, if it's not hundreds of segments, even dozens of segments, the spend for that creative has to make sense as well. We definitely target very dramatically on location. I think that's one of the biggest things that I think that advertisers. It's the easiest thing for them to step into when they have specific messaging. They can better target even down to the zip code than they can do. So it's that combination, as I talk about it, of the big brand messaging of television with that one-to-one relationship with the viewer.
So then, Srishti, from IRI is, in addition to having a measurement business, you guys have a boatload of data. Right. What's your vision of how that data gets utilized to allow the 3 of us to have better advertiser-facing data to drive new business models?
Right. So addressability, not necessarily on a one-to-one, but on a segment basis, is certainly something that advertisers are looking for. So, for example, what we enable at IRI for consumer packaged goods is the ability to take any sort of segment or any sort of buying behavior or attitudinal behavior. So, for example, the left-handed mothers who buy cereal on Tuesday, and build very custom segments on that, and then provide advertisers the ability to activate those across any medium, right? So across any of these, or within Google or anywhere else, right? So it's one consistent definition of the consumer that can be applied across all mediums and channels. And while I would love to say that the industry is moving fast towards that, I don't think it's actually happening as fast as, we talk a lot about it, but within the linear television, even within digital, it's a slow process. Very often, I still talk to advertisers who say, 5 years back, I was selling mac and cheese as an example. I really didn't need any targeting, and I did quite fine, right? I would look for the lowest cost media, and I would go and get that. So I don't think that the boat is just completely going to shift on that one.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we constantly want to remind people, and this is talking very much as an old TV guy, but because there's so much waste in the way TV is bought and sold, because still, to Srishti's point, so much of it is done based on age, sex, demographics, we're actually leaving yield and ROI for our advertisers on the floor because we're not using these data more and being more sophisticated in the more we, sort of align the advertiser's target with the right places across all our inventory. So could each of you guys maybe, let's do 2 more things and then we'll open it up for questions. First, talk about what you see. What is keeping you up at night?
Well, I can go. I think that, we talked a little bit about this. What keeps me up at night is we talk about a lot of sophistication of bringing additional data sources, more targeting, and everything else into the process. But I don't think that we completely understand the operational burden of actually implementing that, right? And that, both from a time and a resource perspective, I think that cost is high. So I wish we would step back and do a little bit more planning and strategic analysis of this first, before saying, every single piece of media I buy is going to be, 100% addressable. Yeah. So that would be mine.
So I definitely have 2 things. One is definitely that data aspect of it with, with first-party data and that advertisers have, and everyone kind of jumping into the data management platform kind of world. There's just this bumper crop of companies that want to sell data. And the work of vetting those is a huge challenge to make sure that we're doing it right and protecting our data and our viewers' data which is hugely important competitively, but also legally. And then the last one goes back to something you were alluding to, Howard, with over-the-top and connected TVs, is understanding viewership there from a media math standpoint, so that we can help our advertisers really build efficient reach curves so that they can better spend their dollars through TV and digital video.
I mean, what keeps me up is,
Well, 4-year-old.
is my 4-year-old, who will wake me up at 3 o'clock in the morning insisting that he's Russell Wilson and I'm Marshawn Lynch, and we need to run some
very
plays.
cool.
I'm not joking. That was last night.
That's very cool.
And hoping that the Hawks have a better second half of the season. Nothing really keeps me up at night. I can tell you what's I think about a lot, and I think it's somewhat ironic, when we think about where we're sitting right now. We're at Google, and I think when the history of the big digital media companies, the big digital advertisers, the Googles and the Facebooks, is a history of walled gardens. And ours in the television world is not. And I think there are advantages to that, and there are disadvantages to that. And so when I think about what the next sort of 12 to 18 months looks like, I think there is a lot of sort of philosophical thinking that needs to take place that centers on the concept of a walled garden versus not, as it pertains to how television and data is evolving. And I think there could be a very strong world where we say the fact that television for the last 50 years has actually rejected the concept of a data measurement and currency walled garden and has embraced one of industry-wide partnership. I think that could be a tremendous opportunity. But I think there's a ton to be, done to figure out how we solve that.
It's great. So let's open it up for questions from the floor. Come on, you got a lot of really smart people here. Anything? Go ahead.
Well, Justin spoke about the cumbersome process about vetting all of the data vendors that are out there. I'm curious to know, from the advertiser point of view, do they have any reservations about adopting these new methodologies that are so very new and not as familiar as something like a Nielsen? How do you kind of assure them that the data is sound and is appropriate for what their new targeting methods should be?
So I think that a lot of what is happening right now is the media agencies looking for differentiation, and so they identify partners who can be helpful, and they sell that into their clients. I think we step in very carefully, right? We do our due diligence, and we don't we try to be good partners. We try to talk to all of our clients and ask them the question they're looking to get to. And if there are ways that we can help them get there, and if we can get comfortable with their methodology, that's great. If not, we try to propose something different. And if it's something that we're really wary of, then we'll make that decision. Go ahead.
So, first of all, terrific that, I love all of your different perspectives, so really insightful. So as people start to become, thank you. As people start to become, more well versed in buying data and they're comfortable with these data buys, how do we factor in data objectivity? It seems like anyone can open up a store and say they have data. Do you view the quality issue coming down the pike, and also, and some of you have been on the agency side too. You had Nielsen, so everyone had the same data set. So it's your word versus theirs. So how do you kind of respond to that sort of thing? How is that the quality and the objectivity piece going to be factored in as we evolve these new models?
So I was watching the previous speaker, and I liked his slide on what humans are good at and what machines are good at. And I think he gave you guys a piece of advice that if you don't want to be out of a job in a decade, you need to think about being in a position where the human is the one training the machine. I think data quality is a scenario where that becomes very important and very true. And there's always going to be, I can't tell you how many mobile geolocation vendors I've met with in the last 6 months. I swear, the new one pops up every 2 weeks, and the best thing about mobile geolocation vendors is they trash each other like no one's business.
I work for Foursquare.
There you go, Foursquare. There you go. I love it. It's literally entertaining. But one of the things that you look at, let's talk about mobile geolocation. Everybody says they have the best data. And so as a person who buys mobile geolocation data to supplement how we think about targeting, you step back and you say, all right, I'm going to start with the outcomes. We'll run tests. One of the things we did at Microsoft, and this is so long ago because I started the e-commerce group at Microsoft, was we set up an infrastructure that allowed us to bring in and kick out data partners within 2 weeks. And we'd bring them in, they'd say, hi, we're a bunch of really smart PhD students from Stanford, and we've developed a new algorithmic buying algorithm. It wasn't called programmatic back then. It was called algorithm. Everyone called it algorithmic buying. And so we'd say, great, we're going to load you in. We're going to run a 30-day test. We're going to see if you're full of crap or not. And so I think that is where the combination of building infrastructure that allows you to do a really good job of learning and frankly, you know, having that openness and to say, yeah, let's go look at Foursquare's data. Let's go look at, 4 of your competitors, but let's actually test it in real world scenarios and see how good it is based upon the outcomes it drives.
But one of the things I think that's really important is you got to consider the end use case of what you're going to take that data and do.
Totally.
Right? One of the challenges that Bryson and I face in our business is until the ad delivery system becomes more addressable, we're still in the world of forecasting, right? And really what the dynamic now is we're no longer forecasting women 18 to 49, we're forecasting diaper buyers. Mm-hmm. And if the data doesn't hold up from the standpoint of being forecastable, if that's a word.
Let's make it one.
And that's your use case, well, you've just ruled that out. And I think part of the challenge is something we were talking about early is just in a world of everybody having 27-hour day jobs, who is the one doing the vetting? Where are you really doing that right research so you're not, first of all, you're not using your company's limited research dollars to buy crap data, but then you're not in a situation where you use crap data on behalf of an advertiser and you look dumb at the end.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I think we have time for one more question. Anybody?
Hi. I know you mentioned segment scalability, and I'm just curious to know, have any of your clients ever drilled down to local level, DMAs, markets? And if so, thank you. If so, I'm just wondering basically the quality integrity of that, as well as is it just beyond devices and so on?
Was that for?
Go ahead.
That's basically for any of you.
Yeah. So I think the question is about kind of the how fine can you get, right? And I think that's something that Srishti was talking about before. You have to have very kind of strict levels for the targeting aspect of it to say, okay, so I know I can do this for you or I can't. So when you're forecasting, as we talked about, I know I can kind of sell you this because you can't go into a room and promise something and then not deliver on it. And then it's also, again, it's based on the quality of the data. So I think that one of the things, if you think about the way we work, we have a subscriber who subscribes, and there is a subscription that is associated with that. And we have demographic data based on that subscriber. How many people here use someone else's Hulu or Netflix or Amazon login? Let's all raise our hands.
That never happens.
That never happens.
Everybody.
So, it's something that everyone's working on, and I think that is where I think the questions kind of get to. How do you get past that?
And I can add a little from a consumer packaged goods perspective, right? I think it depends on the vertical quite a bit, but for a consumer packaged goods industry, the localization is very important because there's a lot that's happening at the store level, right? So for media to be able to match merchandising efforts or other promotions that are happening in the store is quite important. And we have seen a lot of success when merchandising efforts as well as media just work in sync. And the use cases differ, but sometimes when you're doing, let's say, some sort of Hispanic targeting, there are some obvious, right, geo groups there that can be formed. So depending on the use case, it's quite valuable. We've seen it go down even to the store level in some cases for digital only and work quite well.
Okay, I'm going to add one more thing because I love the local stuff. This will not get you a free drink from a bartender. However,
Damn.
Does anybody know when the term soccer mom was coined? Okay. Soccer mom was coined in 1996 by Mark Penn's research team who was running the Clinton campaign. Yeah. And great book Mark Penn wrote called Micro Trends. I made everybody on my Surface marketing team read it. It's terrific. There is a very interesting line from the work that Mark came to Microsoft later and mentored me a little bit. He's awesome. There's a very interesting line between the work that Mark's team did in the 96 Clinton campaign on identifying tipping point audiences for what was then the Clinton victory, and then what Obama's campaign did, where they took a lot of the audience definition techniques that Penn used in the 90s and started applying that to local media buying. It's genius. Like those guys were genius and so far ahead of the curve when it came to the application of those techniques, but at a daily optimization with local advertising. Guess what? A lot of them work for the Hillary campaign now, and so those guys are now doing amazing work. So I think when you think about sort of the notion of local targeted ads, it is very much tied to this notion of microsegmentation and the ability for ad platforms to actually accept that, right? And so there aren't a lot of advertisers who are operating at that level of frequency of optimization and that level of audience sophistication. I can tell you with 100% confidence the political guys do. Yep. And increasingly, a lot of large, sophisticated advertisers are starting to look to what the campaign marketers are doing and learn from it, because now, we have the ability to track that all the way through to not just did somebody, put a ballot in for Hillary, but did they put a ballot in for Colgate toothpaste?
So this was great. Please join me in congratulating, thanking these guys for a great panel.